February 8, 1970. It's a typical winter day in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. A group of scouts is heading out for another hike full of adventure and strength testing. But for one boy, this day will be fatal. 16-year-old Jeffrey Haig goes missing, leaving behind only cold footprints in the snow and many unanswered questions. His frozen body was found 10 days later. Only one boot, pants down, backpack far from the place where he died. What happened to Jeffrey Haig in those terrible hours when he disappeared from the group? Could it have been a tragedy caused by cold and disorientation? Or was there something much more sinister behind it? On the morning of Saturday, February 7, 1970, Eugene Smith parked in the parking lot at Newfound Gap, on the Tennessee-North Carolina border, deep in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Smith was the scoutmaster of a local explorer troop, and this weekend he was leading 3 of his scouts on a small camping trip to the Ice Water Springs shelter. He was accompanied by another adult troop advisor, Marvin Horner, and the 3 scouts who went with him were his son Lee, 15-year-old Stephen Wolf, and 16-year-old Jeff Haig. All 3 boys had experience in hiking and camping. For Jeff, however, it was his first winter hike, and winter camping is a whole different matter. In addition to the low temperature, the group faced another challenge: to cover 3 miles from the parking lot to the shelter. While this distance may not seem like much, the quarter-mile elevation gain on a trail that starts at 5,000 feet makes this hike significantly more challenging. The first day of the hike went off without a hitch. All participants arrived safely at the campsite and set up camp. However, Marvin Horner, one of the adult chaperones, decided to return to the car and drive home immediately after the group arrived. The next morning, the others prepared breakfast, packed their bags, and headed back west toward Newfound Gap, following the Appalachian Trail. Around 9:30 a.m., when the group reached the fork where the Appalachian Trail diverges from the Boulevard Trail, Jeff said he needed to stop and rest. It didn't seem to be a big deal. He planned to catch up with the group later in the parking lot. According to eyewitnesses, Eugene Smith, the scoutmaster, continued on with Jeffrey and Stephen Wolf, leaving his son Lee behind to finish packing. Everyone assumed that Jeff would wait for Lee and then they would follow. Smith believed that his son Lee would soon catch up with Jeff and they would continue on together, following the pair system. He set off ahead with Wolf, thinking he would meet the rest of the boys in the parking lot. 2 hours later, Eugene and Stephen did indeed make it to the parking lot and started waiting for the others. About 10 minutes later, Lee came out to the parking lot, but Jeff was not with him. This confused Eugene, who asked his son, "Where's Jeff?" Lee, however, did not know that he was supposed to meet Jeff on the trail. The 3 boys waited a little longer, but an increasingly worried Eugene realized that something had gone wrong. He decided that they needed to go back to the trail immediately and look for Jeff. The group hiked all the way back to the Ice Water Springs shelter, but never found the missing scout. The situation was complicated by the fact that in the morning, when they woke up, there was already 10 to 15 centimeters of snow on the ground, and it was snowing heavily again. Time was running out to find Jeff, and Eugene decided to immediately go to the ranger station and report him missing. Rangers immediately arrived on the scene and combed the area until dusk. However, no matter how hard they searched, no trace of Jeff was found. Despite the setback that day, the rescuers remained optimistic. When it comes to missing people, scouts who are properly equipped are considered among the best at surviving in the wild. Although Jeff didn't have a tent, he had a sleeping bag, matches, some food, and enough warm clothes to survive the cold night. At one point, the National Park Rangers said they believed Jeff could survive on his own for 7 to 10 days with the gear he had. At the very least, he could have held out if he had kept his cool. On Monday, February 9th, the first full day of the search began, involving 18 people. 10 of them were park rangers, and the other 8 were members of a rescue team from Morristown. At the start of the search, there was 8 inches of snow on the ground, of which 4 inches fell after Jeff went missing. On the first day, the rescuers combed the trails and took into account possible paths that Jeff could have taken or where he could have ended up if he had wandered off the trail. In the end, it was decided that Jeff must have left the trail, but the question was where exactly that happened and which direction he went. It is worth noting that the trails run along the crests of the Appalachian Mountains. They do not go through valleys. There are steep slopes on both sides of the trails. This does not mean that if you take a few steps to the side, you will certainly fall and die, but the descent from these slopes is extremely difficult. The idea that Jeff had left the trail where he was last seen was rejected because there were no tracks to indicate this, and it would have been extremely difficult to descend in that location. In addition, no one could think of a good reason why he would have done so. The trails went northeast and west, and to the south was a mountainside with nothing beyond it. There was no reason why Jeff would have gone down that slope. Given that he hadn't turned back and gone east, and given that he never made it to the parking lot, there were few options. He could have gone about a mile west and turned south on the Sweat Heifer Trail, or he could have gone north from the fork in the Boulevard Trail. When the rescuers checked the Sweat Heifer Trail, there were no tracks on it. Therefore, they assumed that Jeff must have gone to Boulevard, which was more popular and more frequently used. The problem was that there was no way to distinguish Jeff's footprints from the other footprints on this trail. At that point, the only thing the rescuers knew for sure was that Jeff had probably gone on the Boulevard Trail, but had either gone off it or reached the end point. After failing to find anything of value on the first day, the search was significantly expanded. On the second day, more than 100 people joined the search. Search dogs were brought in, and a headquarters was organized near the Ice Water Springs shelter. 2 dogs were involved: Sam, who belonged to Benton Taylor from Asheville, North Carolina, and Tracer from the Sevier County Rescue Team. Unfortunately, even though the dogs were on site, they had to face problems due to the severe cold, and the dogs' noses started to freeze, so they were only used for about an hour before one of them was taken off the trail. Tracer, on the other hand, continued the search until dark, but due to 2 feet of snow, he was unable to pick up any trace. Meanwhile, 48 more volunteers from rescue teams from Tennessee, North Carolina, and other states joined the search operation. Jeff's dad, William, helped with the search, and he reminded the rescuers that he had taught Jeff, if you get lost in the woods, find water and head downstream. In addition to checking the trails that had already been cleared, they identified several places where Jeff could have ended up if he had wandered off the trail. One of these places was called Huggins Hell, which is a very steep and difficult to access section west of the Boulevard Trail. The Boulevard Trail stretches from the fork in the Appalachian Trail near the Ice Water Springs shelter and passes over several mountain ridges to Mount LeConte. They also checked 5 shelters between Peck's Corner and Mount Collins along the east-west section of the Appalachian Trail, as well as 2 shelters on the Sweat Heifer Trail and on Mount LeConte. The search covered all possible trail shelters within the radius of where Jeff was last seen. If he wasn't found on the trails, it meant that Jeff was probably in one of the dangerous gorges that crisscross the Great Smoky Mountains. The good news was that the rescuers still believed it was possible that Jeff could have survived with his skills and equipment. But now, the search turned into a race against time. If he was not found quickly, even if the cold did not cause his death, exhaustion and hunger could lead to a tragic end. Luckily, on Wednesday, February 11, 1970, the weather finally improved. The skies cleared, and 2 helicopters from Fort Bragg Army Base were able to take to the air to try to find any trace of Jeff. Sometimes 411's missing persons cases involve famous names. In this rare case, a helicopter provided by a man named Tony Stark. Franklin Graham, son of the famous evangelist Billy Graham, was involved in the search for Jeff Haig. He helped with dogs in the search operation. 2 of the dogs belonged to his father, and 2 belonged to another person who trained them. Franklin was in charge of the dogs belonging to his father. The search operation with the dogs centered near the Ice Water Springs shelter, where they began combing the area in an attempt to find traces of Jeff. Simultaneously with the aerial search, mountain climbing teams were examining the slopes of the mountains. Members of the Reserve Officers Corps participated in the search. University of Tennessee and the Clemson University Mountaineering Club, as well as several volunteers from Kingston, Tennessee. The search for Jeff Haig lasted until Friday and then into the weekend, when the hope of finding him alive was becoming less and less with each passing day. Finally, on Sunday, February 15th, the dogs picked up a trail near the Walker Prong area, which had already been combed on Tuesday, February 10th. At that point, there was more snow and other dogs were used. Grady Whitehead was working with snow-sniffing dogs brought in from Washington, D.C. The searchers assumed that Jeff might have gotten off the Boulevard Trail, realizing his mistake, and decided to return by taking a shortcut. However, this turned out to be a fatal decision. The next morning, on Monday, February 16th, the dogs led the search team to a strange scene. A sleeping bag, a backpack, canned food, kitchen utensils, a toothbrush, a can opener, and 2 of Jeff's belts were lying on a rock in the middle of the stream. Nearby, they found a piece of apple and dry, but not burnt branches. This finding was important, but also disturbing. It showed that Jeff was unlikely to survive without his belongings in such harsh conditions. Some rescuers believed that Jeff had left his gear behind to make it easier to move around, figuring he could come back for it later. It was believed that he tried to walk down the stream bed to the road, but his tracks were lost under Highway 441. Theories about his fate were divided, with one suggesting that he may have survived and hitchhiked out of the park, unaware that he was being sought. The other, more tragic, said that Jeff died on the first night, his scent carried away by the flow of water. The next day, February 17th, Jeff Haig's body was found at about 10 a.m. under a tree 300 yards from the Boulevard Trail. The circumstances of the death left many questions. The coroner was unable to determine the exact cause of death. Jeff was wearing scout pants, long underwear, a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, a red woolen hat, and glasses. However, one of his shoes and a sock had been removed, and his other shoes and jacket were lying next to his body. Despite all this, the coroner believed that Jeff died of hypothermia, given that he was cold, wet, and exhausted when he was in the gorge. It seems that Jeff's last actions can be determined by the position of his body. Another fact that draws attention is that he had matches and a sleeping bag, which seems like a much better option than taking off his shoes to rub his toes. So the question arises, why didn't he use these things? The report says that Jeff apparently collected the dry branches but did not attempt to light them. This could mean that no used matches were found or that the branches had no fire marks. This is rather strange. The fact that he gathered the branches indicates that he was thinking clearly enough to prepare for a fire. Therefore, it is difficult to say that panic prevented him from doing so. It is possible that the matches fell into the stream and got wet, assuming that Jeff or his backpack fell into the water. This could explain why he did not try to start a fire and why he did not use his sleeping bag. However, it does not quite explain why his belongings were neatly stacked on the rocks. Perhaps he was trying to dry them. Reports claim that the items were folded neatly, which may indicate an attempt at drying. It is possible that his belongings fell into the creek and he was just trying to dry them or realized that they were no longer usable. It is also possible that the report of having matches was false. Perhaps he did not try to start a fire not because he was unwilling, but because he was unable to. Even if he did not have matches, this does not explain why he did not use his sleeping bag. And if he really did not have matches, panic could have been a factor again. Furthermore, regardless of whether he had matches, there is a chance that the sleeping bag got wet in the creek too. There's also another version of events. Jeff, instead of staying put as he was taught during his survival training, decided to try to get out on his own instead of staying put and waiting for rescue. This is a general rule of thumb. If you get lost near a trail, stay put. If there is no immediate danger, don't leave because you will definitely be found. This may explain why Jeff was not found on the second day of the search. The rescuers could have walked by him, but did not see or hear him. Perhaps Jeff was already dead by then because he was unable to start a fire and did not use a sleeping bag. He probably died on Sunday night or Monday morning before rescuers had a chance to find him. As for his decision to get off the trail and look for a shortcut, it can be explained by the fact that Jeff was young and had survival training. Teenagers are often confident in their ability to handle any situation, and this could have influenced his decision. Perhaps he just thought it would be a quick and easy way out. Although it is not certain that this confidence was the reason for his decision, it is worth considering this possibility. The main question is not why he went down into the gorge, but how he ended up on the Boulevard Trail in the first place. According to the plan, he was supposed to wait for Lee Smith, and he should not have been on this trail, let alone gone off it. According to some sources, the dogs were unable to track Jeff's scent north of Walker Camp Prong, even though he should have come from there. This seems strange because if he came down from the Boulevard Trail, his scent should have remained. Perhaps it was a mistake in the reports or the scent disappeared due to weather conditions. However, it raises some suspicion because logically, if he had gone down the trail should have been visible. This story leaves more questions than answers. Was Jeffrey Haig the victim of a mysterious abductor, as described in the Missing 411 theories? Or did this invisible factor make him go the wrong way, leaving him wandering in circles and eventually falling victim to nature? Or can it all be explained by chance, panic, and harsh weather conditions? No direct evidence was ever found to indicate the involvement of a third party, but at the same time, a number of circumstances make us wonder why he was on the wrong trail. Why didn't he wait for his friend? And how could he have been so close to the place where he was supposed to be found, but remained unnoticed? The search for the truth continues. And although many questions remain unanswered, we can be sure of one thing. Nature can be merciless to those who find themselves in its path without preparation, or when unexplained events occur that lead to tragedy. What do you think? Is there something more to this story, or is it just a sad coincidence? Write your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your versions. That's all. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. See you soon. Bye.